Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 2, Plato. And our topic is evaluation of Plato's political theory. We are going to discuss Plato's adversities. Plato has been interpreted in so different ways that they make conclusion vary. If for one set of people, Plato is a revolutionary and a prophet of socialism. For others, he is a forerunner of fascism and an advocate of reactionaries. Aristotle, Plato's disciple, was his greatest critic. RHS Grossman, C.M. Bora, W. Fight, B. Frington, Winspear, Karl Popper are men who have condemned Plato. G.C. Field, Ronald B. Levinson, John Wilde, A.E. Tyler, Ernest Barker admire him. Of all the critics, Popper's criticism of Plato is the most devastating. Plato to Popper was an enemy of the open society. Popper holds the view that Plato advocated a closed system, which was not different from an idealist reproduction of the tribalism of the past. To Popper, Plato's philosophy and its theories of justice, communism, and education, etc., are but so many subtle way of justifying authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Plato's philosophy sought to perpetuate or eternalize the ideal of anti-democracy, anti-change, and anti-open society. Popper's tirade against Plato can be summed up in his own words. Plato's fundamental demands can be expressed in either of the two formulae. The first corresponding to his idealist theory of change and rest, the second to his neutralism. The idealist formula is arrest all political change, change is evil, rest divine. All change can be arrested if the state is made an abject copy of its original, that is, of poem or idea of the city. Should it be asked how this is practicable, we can reply with the naturalistic formula: back to the nature, back to the original state of our forefathers, the primitive state founded in accordance with the human nature and therefore stable, back to the tribal patriarchy of the time before the fall to the natural class rule of the wise few over the ignorant many. Condemning Plato's political program, Popper says that it, far from being morally superior to totalitarianism, is fundamentally identical with it. Popper asserts that the Plato's ideal state would lead to a closed system. To quote Popper, excellent as Plato's sociological diagnosis was, his own development proves that the therapy he recommends is worse than the evil he tries to combat. Arresting political change is not the remedy. It cannot bring happiness. We can never return to the alleged innocence and beauty of the closed system. Our dream of heaven cannot be realized on earth. Once we begin to rely upon our reason and to use our powers of criticism, we cannot return to a state of implicit submission to tribal magic. For those who have eaten of the tree of knowledge, paradise is lost. The more we try to return to the heroic age of tribalism, the more surely do we arrive at the inquisition, at the secret police, and at a romanticized gangsterism. Beginning with the suppression of research and truth, we must end with the most brutal and violent destruction of all that is human. There is no return to a humanist state of nature. If we turn back, then we must go the whole way. We must return to the best. John J. Chapman, a devout anti Platonist, called Plato the Prince of Conjures. W. Fight holds the view that the Plato had the vacillation of all adolescent. R. H. Grossman says that Plato was wrong both for his times and for ours. Plato's adversities have been active in all the ages, beginning from his own days and even including his pupils. Aristotle, particularly Plato's enemies, have been really unfair to him. Popper's condemnation is an illustration of such treatment of Plato. If Plato were truly totalitarian, then he would have built a police state, would have made provisions for secret police, would have suggested severe and harsh punishments, would have provided concentration camps, would have landed terror. But nowhere do we find Plato saying all this. On the contrary, he pictures an ideal state whose aim is ethical, whose rulers are guided by a rational plan, and who have to have a particular type of education, a systematic training, and a life of declaration, dedication, and almost renunciation. Now, the next topic is Plato's place in Western political theory. Plato's political philosophy, which emerges from his writings, has its special importance in the history of the Western political theory. Jovet rightly describes Plato as a father of philosophy, politics, and literary idealism. He says, nowhere in Plato is there a deeper irony or a greater wealth of humor or imaginary or more dramatic power, nor in any other of his writings is the attempt made to interweave life and speculations, or to connect politics to philosophy. Professor Maxey writes, but the midrip of his Plato's political philosophy was timeless and universal. As a Greek of the post Periclean period, he was an anti expansionist, a disbeliever in democracy, a foe of commercialism, and an admirer of Laconian militarism. But as an analyst of social and political institutions and a seeker of the ideal, he was the forerunner and inspirer of most of the anti materialistic political philosophies, reconstructivist political theories, and radical political programs, which had appeared in subsequent ages. For Emerson, Plato was philosophy and philosophy Plato. Plato's contribution to the Western political thought is without any parallel. He has given it a direction, a basis, and a vision. Political idealism is Plato's gift to Western political philosophy. An idealist, as Plato really was, he was more interested in future than in the present, in a model that a state can be than in a actual state, in the form of state than in a state that appears at present. This does not mean that the idealists do not take into account what the present or the actual state is. In fact, the idealists built the fabric of the future on the basis of the present. It is the present that dictates their future. Plato's idealism was grounded in the circumstances of the then city state. His was a movement to change the Greek of his own time, not for the past as Popper says, but for a future, for a model, and that too through a rational plan. Accordingly, Plato can be described as an idealist, but not a utopian, a physician, and not a life giver, a reformer, and not a dreamer. There is originality in Plato in so far he had built not very uncommon institutions on postulates he thought basic. Plato's significance lie in making education as the bedrock on which is the structured the whole ideal state. If the whole scheme of education is practiced completely, the development of the state is certainly assured. Sound education and sound nurturing are guarantees for full fledged betterment. He was of the opinion that the state could be structured afresh as against Popper's view of piecemeal social engineering. Plato is a philosopher and at the same time an idealist. A philosopher is one who thinks more than he sees. He sees things in general and avoids what is particular. Plato was such a philosopher who saw the general deteriorating conditions of the city state of his time. He sought to diagnose the ailment rather than the symptoms. What ailed the ancient Greek society was the ever striking corrupt rulers, and his diagnosis then was to give the people a set of rulers who knew the art of ruling. Plato was such a philosopher who never lost sight of philosophy, one that was idealistic, purposive, future oriented, and normative, and yet within the framework of actual conditions. He did not reach the heights, but he remained within the reach of what was practicable. He was thus a philosopher who remained within the boundaries of the realities. He was a philosopher who looked towards the sky, but with his feet grounded on the earth. Plato may not be a saint, but he is a teacher of all of us. We can criticize him, but we cannot ignore him. Plato's another contribution to Western political thought was his radicalism. He innovated novel ideas and integrated them skillfully in a political scheme. His radicalism lies in the fact that his rulers are rulers without comforts and luxuries possessed by men of property. They are masters without owing anything. They are parents without calling the children their own. They have powers, absolute powers, but they also have absolute responsibilities. It was a plan to organize the entire social order on the basis of knowledge, skill, and expertise. It was a total negation to the Periclean idea of participatory democratic order, with emphasis on capacity and individuality rather than equality. Plato's attempt in the Republic is to portray a perfect model of an ideal order. With primacy of education, he conceived of an elite which would wield power not for themselves but for the good of the society. But there was no prescription for checking degeneration or abuse of power. It is because of such an important omission his more realistic pupil Aristotle conceived of an ideal state not on the blueprint of the republic but of the laws. The beginning of the modern democratic order based on the rule of law could be traced to the laws and not to the republic. However, Plato's place in Western political thought is matchless. His legacy spreads with age, and it is really difficult to prepare a list of subsequent political philosophers who might not have Plato's imprint, either explicitly or implicitly. Now let us discuss a summary of the unit. Plato was one of the prolific writers, a philosopher of the ancient Greek, born in 428 BC and died in 348 BC. His works have come to us in the form of dialogue, which have an appeal to the educated and an interest in philosophy. He was a great political philosopher. In him, myth, metaphor, humor, irony, pass, and a rich Greek vocabulary captivate those who read him, as his philosophy leads to the most pressing issues of the mind and reality. Plato was influenced by his teacher Socrates and by the then conditions of the ancient Greek. The theme of Plato's social and political thought, especially of the Republic, is that philosophy alone offers the true power. It also is the way to knowledge. The philosopher knows the forms, the ideas. He alone is fit to rule. Those who are guided by reason and knowledge alone should have the power. They alone are capable of establishing justice, to see that everyone contributes to the best of his abilities, of maintaining the size and purity and unity of the state. These rulers, possessed with the element of gold, together with men of silver and of copper, constitute the ideal state. Justice for Plato lies in each class and in each individual in his own class, doing his own job. Plato gives to these three classes education which each one needs. Plato, being a perfectionist, does not take any chance and seeks to have a corruption free administration. That is why he applied communistic devices on the guardians. Plato's friends and foes are numerous. His admirers describe him as an idealist and a philosopher, as also a teacher of all. His adversaries condemned him as the enemy of open society, an anti democrat, and a fascist. His contribution to Western political thought is without any parallel. He has given Western political thought a basis, a vision, and a direction. Now we want to wind up this lecture and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.